Hello and welcome, Exiles. Today I want to teach you guys how to trade like a royal merchant. Now, of course, I am talking about the end-all, be-all, the king of the searches. I'm talking about the weighted sum. You'll see right here I get a value. It says 190. That's how powerful, based on my search, that's how powerful this ring is. That's what it's valued at. Now, who got me into this? I have to give credit where credit is due. Connor made a pretty nice video going over a bunch of different ways to trade and things you can do to optimize your trade searches. So I'm going to link that in the description below. But specifically, I want to cover one, the weighted sum, because it just blows everything else out of the water. And two, I want to talk about how I've updated the trade searches to the Spellblade Inquisitor start and how I found out about a new upgrade we can make to the build that I will go over at the end of the video. Now, getting into the weighted sum, how does this thing work? Well, you'll see right now I have this trade search set up where essentially I've given the trade a bunch of stats that I care about for my Spellblade character. I care about life, I care about strength and int, I care about crit, I care about res, all that sort of stuff. And essentially the way it works is in the leftmost column here, you're telling the search string how much do you value a stat. So for every one flat life, I'm going to say that's worth 0.7 value. Personally, I think it's a little bit less valuable than one strength or a little bit less value than one int. So that's what I'm valuing it at. For my baseline, I chose strength and int to be my one value. And then I kind of just went either multiples of that or multiple less than that, depending on how much I value a stat. For example, I might value crit multi as twice as valuable as strength or int. So I would say 20 crit multi for me in my initial build is probably the similar value of me having something with 40 flat strength. That's roughly the idea we're going for here. Or cast speed, I value at 3.5 times the value. The point is, for your build, you have to decide what stats matter to you and then set up a weighting system for it for all the possible stats you might want on a ring. Now, you can make this as complicated or as less complicated as possible. For example, you can cover all the resistance values with some of these pseudo mods, like the total chaos res I'm going to value at 1.4 per chaos res. So if I have a stat that says 10 chaos res, that's a weighting of 14, and that's how it's factored in. Now, some of the advantages of this search is, one, it allows you to progressively upgrade your character. Now, right out here, you'll see this thing has a 174 weighting. Every single one of these things, they have the weighting of how much based on my weighting system are they worth. Now, I could click here to see the most valuable item. And for me, I have 392 because there's a triple 145 attribute Giga Chad ring that got made via the Calandra mechanic, which is just insane, right? Clearly, the search string found me a valuable ring when I sorted by the highest. Now, essentially what you would do is as you go and progress your character, say you initially got some rings that were 150 weight value and you're starting to get some currency, you want to upgrade some more, you can just change this weighting and say you want to get a 200 value ring, you'll start seeing rings that are just objectively a bit better than the rings you were seeing previously. Or, for example, say you don't care about a stat or you care more about a stat, you can change the individual weightings here. Now, the one thing when you're setting this up for yourself that I'd recommend outside of just picking your stats you care about in your build is you always want to factor in the value of a prefix and a suffix for the chance you can craft yourself one on a ring. So like, for example, a ring that has 4 stats you want, but then 2 dead affixes is going to be weaker than a ring that has 4 stats you want of equivalent value and then 1 open suffix or 1 open prefix. And the way you can factor that into these weighted sums is you give the empty prefix or empty suffix a value weighting, and you can say you can have a maximum of one of these when it's considered for its power level, and then you set it to a count of maximum 1 when it comes to all 3 of these with crafted mods, because if there's a crafted prefix, that will come up as an empty prefix on suffix or prefix, but it will also count for example, if they had crafted intelligence, I believe it'll get counted twice for empty prefix and for intelligence, and you don't want things to be double weighted, so that's what this count search is for. Outside of that, it's really just picking the stats you want, setting a value, and then going from there, and you can customize this as much as you want and as little as you want and how much you want to min-max it. Now, for the build I'm making, the strength in stacker, I've set up this trade search folder, and I've done these weighted sum searches for rings, I've done them for boots, I've done them for, I did them for a jewel, and I did them for a shield. Now, these are just items that we can have rare slots for. Generally, all the other slots, I would just recommend using some of the uniques recommended initially, and then eventually, like, for example, malachai, simula, or crown of thorns, these will carry you a while, and then you could do a rare helmet upgrade in between, but ultimately, I don't know, by the time you get to the I don't know, I would probably just go to Crown of the Inward Eye as my next step upgrade as I'd like upgrade other pieces. Crown of the Inward Eye is going to start getting flooded onto the market. It's a fairly common drop, unless they changed it to be an uber serious drop, in which case Crown of the Inward Eye is going to be a lot less accessible, which is okay. The build works without it, but in that case, you might want to get a pretty good rare before it as a mid step. But the point is, I've added these weighted sum searches to my guide to help you out. Just if you're looking for upgrades, one of the things I big time recommend, people ask me, what do I upgrade past the normal setup? And it's these sorts of rare items. It's getting good rare rings, it's getting a good rare shield, good rare boots, some good jewels, and those are the primary things I would target after the initial uniques recommended. Ultimately, the build ends up having a lot of uniques, like your chest piece is going to be an Ivory's Tower. It's never going to be a rare chest piece. So it's pretty much until you get the Balbala Ivory Tower, you just can't equip those things, right? So that's the progression of the character, and hopefully that will help you out. Now, if you want to import this trade folder, I am updating the POB, which will be in the description of this video. You can go to the notes section, and all you want to do is highlight from the bottom and up. If you highlight and accidentally copy over some of this extra text or something, it'll break the search. But if you do it correctly, you should be able to go over to your import section here and do this, and you should come up with 26 bookmarks. I click save, and all of a sudden I have all my trade searches here. I can just click once, and it'll search X item in my trade search. Now, I will also say, in case I haven't mentioned it, which I don't think I have, this extension is called Better Trading. It's a browser extension. You can get it on Chrome. You can get it on Firefox. Just look it up. This is the one I'm using. You don't have to do this. This is just a means for an extra little tool for those who want a little bit of extra search power. And I also made a search string for the tri-stack character for a few different tri-stack items, which I will include I'll put the tri-stack POB in the description below. That's just going to be an import of the test character I did. It's a rough POB. I have some ideas for things I'm going to change and optimize with it, but I don't want to go into too many details because I'm planning to just do that and have fun, going into trying and experimenting and min-maxing that in the actual league. So that will be available for you guys. And then last but not least, I want to talk about a specific change I've made to the character that I actually really like, and that is the malachai simula. After I had done my test run where I recorded the full run through and did that as a guide, I did have somebody mention, hey, what about trying out malachai simula? And I thought about that for a second. I was like, could that actually work? It gives you blood magic and double damage and a little bit of strength, a little bit of lightning res. How is this good? Number one, blood magic gives you 10% more life. At the time, we were running a Tempest Shield, a Discipline, and a Haste. And I was thinking, can we make that work with blood magic? And it turns out you kind of can. So before this helmet, I had more like 2k life, and I reserved down to 1k. After this helmet, I went to 2k2 life, and I'm reserving a bit more, but it still ends up with the same flat life total. So what's happening here? Instead of having Arrogance linked to my Tempest Shield to take me into low life, I now have Eternal Blessing linked to Haste, which this is something I've been loving doing with blood magic characters, and blood magic has really grown on me because it does a lot of things that I like. And number one is you get the 50% aura that you care about most with Eternal Blessing. That gives you a bit of aura effect on it, and you get to reserve it for free. Because the way Eternal Blessing works is it stops you from reserving any other mana reservations, but it doesn't stop you from reserving your life pool. So essentially with a blood magic character, it's a free reservation. I love doing this. And so that gets our haste aura. Then you'll notice we have Discipline and Tempest Shield elsewhere in our character, and that's 60% reservation of our 2k2 life pool total. But we end up having a decent or a similar amount of life left over anyways, even though we're reserving a bit more. Now, what do I like about this specifically? Essentially, this allows us to get away from a mana pool and have a life pool. Now, I also ended up having to include a bit of vitality reservation, and the way I did that is I swapped to grabbing this wheel here with a little bit of aura effect and some reservation efficiency. I changed a few nodes. I dropped Sanctity. I dropped, I forget what else. I basically took out I think I pretty much just dropped this node, and then I dropped this wheel, and I swapped to doing here and here is what I ended up swapping. And that reservation allows us to have one, still a 1k life pool after the reservation, which is decent to deal with chaos. But two, with Vitality as an aura, we actually have a good amount of life sustain. And even though our skills were previously fairly mana intensive or whatever, I also was able to drop the cost mastery, the one here, the 30% cost mastery, because my whole cost is now life. Essentially what this allows us to do is while I'm playing, I now have very good mana sustain, and I can drop the mana flask entirely. Now previously, while I was doing the run, I'd have to press the mana flask here and there. Occasionally I'd run out of mana and it'd brick me from doing this or that. Like if you saw on the full run through when I did the third floor boss, I actually spammed my mana flask before the boss even spawned, and I was in a bit of trouble. Luckily my Armageddon brand stuck around and just mostly killed her. But having messed up my mana in the middle there, you can misplay, and there's issues where mana can become a problem, and this solves that. The other upside is we get 20% double damage, which is no small feat. It's 20% more damage at the baseline, but on top of that, it also increases damage by letting you hit a higher shock. So when you proc that double damage, if you proc it on one of your better hits, you're going to inflict a higher shock, which then allows you to do more damage overall. So there are quite a few benefits. I actually think this is a fairly good DPS upgrade. We end up losing, I think, about 100 ES, because before this setup, the setup I had with the other tree and this rare hubris you see here, I had about 3,100 ES and like 70 ES or something like that. So it was a little over 100 ES higher than this. So we had a bit higher flat base damage, but trading that little bit of flat for 20% double damage, and technically we did pick up, I guess, a little bit of crit chance with the 20 flat strength, I think is a worthy trade on top of the fact it fixes mana. So I really like this going forward. Don't worry, it's a level 14, 17 item or something, and it's a T4 rarity unique, so it's very common. Should be easy to pick up. Worst case scenario, if this thing is somehow expensive, which I highly would doubt, but if it is expensive, then you can simply just hold off on it. Just wait until simply wait until this comes down in price, in terms of just use a rare helmet or use the Crown of Thorns first. Just use the other setup. I have now updated the POB to include both setups. So for example, I have here at the bottom, I have the 70 malachai version versus the 70 version. So you can see that both trees are there if this helmet randomly is expensive, which it won't be. I would bet probably $1,000 this thing's going to be 1C 5 hours into the league. I don't see this thing getting expensive at all. Outside of that, I technically have added in the gear setup, which have malachais. It's the same setup as this, except it's with malachais. And then outside of that, the other thing I changed is I gave you guys a skill setup with malachais. And the only difference here is basically Eternal Blessing is getting linked to haste instead of having a Tempest Shield linked to arrogance. It's a very similar setup, very little changes, but the big difference is you have, oh, also we do have to include vitality. So I should actually have that in here because I did forget about that when I was setting this up, but you have to have vitality. And this is going to be somewhere around, I don't know, level 13, something like that. Just to mean, I have to manually click it, I guess. Just to let you know that this is how we're sustaining your life pool, and it should work really smoothly. So that's the update there. And I included the extra trees, and I have updated the note section. So updated PUB in the description of this video. Hopefully you guys appreciate me going over and adding these extra trade filters for the ability to do some weighted sums for cool items. I would highly recommend set up other things you think you're going to need during the progression of the character based on how you're planning to spec it out or how you're going to change the character as you go. But I got some examples for you to work off of and give you something to say, okay, that's how he does weighted sum. Anyways, as always, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Take care and peace out.